continue.
So like I was saying that, ultimately, the labor movement is very democratic, and it's just going to take leadership from within the unions to really to get some better leadership in the movement. And I mean, Rich Trumka just died of a heart attack about a month ago. I would say he's like an important transition figure. He's kind of helped, he and John Sweeney helped set the table, I think. And personally, I hope that someone like Sarah Nelson from the Flight Attendants Union gets elected next year, I think, is their elections. So, and she's the kind of good leader that has come up, she has come up through the ranks too, and knows how to organize and is strategically and tactically really smart. So, with good leadership, you can get good organizations, I think, in this sense. So long-winded, I know. So, take it away, Will, or I don't know how we're going to proceed, but we can.
Yeah. So I figured I would invite Mark Anderlich to talk to us about how kind of, the labor movement and kind of various anti-war movements intersect. I know like where Mark is from in Missoula, they've been, mentioned in like Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States with their protests, where I think it was with the Gulf War. And then we've gotten, throughout history, kind of the longshoremen, the ILWU, taking various anti-war stances throughout history. And so I was just thought it would be good to maybe invite Mark to talk to the Socialist Party's Anti-War Working Group about, how, these movements intersect and how they work together, throughout history. And Mark, can take it away for us. Whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, thanks, Will. And it's a big topic. I have two thoughts, to maybe start off the discussion. One is that the history. So, for instance, before or during World War I and before World War I, there was, it's fair to say that labor was on the ascendancy in the United States and in lots of other countries, right, too. And obviously, capital and the government got nervous about that. And I think, when the Espionage and the Sedition Acts were passed in 1916, 17, something like that. Unfortunately, the Sedition Act was modeled after Montana's law, which the state officially, denounced, a few years ago. But it was a way of, if you expressed any opinion against the war, World War I, and it was a bloody, useless affair, really, in any sort of understanding of these things. The government and capital used those acts with the Palmer raids, and deported, I don't know, 1,000, maybe more. Union organizers and radical activists who weren't born in this country, right? So, and immigration laws back then were like non-existent, right? So they created the pretext in many ways to get rid of the undesirables, and use the war effort and the first coordinated propaganda campaign actually in the United States was done by the US government and the military, especially, to promote the war. So you got a population that is full of patriotic fervor and mindless worshiping of war, and it was used, and they were manipulated into supporting getting rid of all these radicals, right? So I think that in in current times, I look at, I mean, it's no secret, I mean, that the generals and the Department of Defense people have lied to the American people about Afghanistan for 20 years, right? They've lied to presidents, okay? And some presidents have been able to resist that a little bit, like Obama did slightly. But generally, I think, and I know this is maybe apostasy to say this here, but when Trump was talking about the deep state, okay, he wasn't entirely making it up, okay, and I do think that there's this military industrial complex, okay, that just keeps going and going and going and going, right, and there's no self-reflection on, well, what did we do wrong in Afghanistan or anything like that. It's power forward, because they have interest in selling arms and selling all the intricate pieces. And if you look at a list of military contractors, for instance, every single congressional district has got at least a couple of dozen military contractors. Some would be bigger than others, like Montana doesn't have really that much in terms of money. There's a couple of sizable ones, but not that much. And there are other places, I know, like California or Washington State, Boeing, for instance, right, has ginormous, right? And so you have in your state, well, in the west part of the state, lots of people whose rice bowl depends on Boeing selling weapons of destruction or mass destruction, right, to other countries or to our own military. All right. So, and so this military industrial complex continues on. I mean, I'm not saying anything people don't know already. And, but I think what we've witnessed here is something that's a little unusual, in that we have an administration that decided, screw it, we're just going to pull out, right? We're just going to pull out of Afghanistan. It serves, and I think that was absolutely the right decision. One more injury, one more death, at the hands of the U.S. military or on the U.S. military itself is not worth it, right, for Afghanistan. And but the outpouring of this, the media, and so the retired military industrial complex people and the military industrial complex itself is just pushing this narrative on us against the administration of Biden, which I think is fascinating, right? Because they're trying to punish him for pulling out of Afghanistan. And this, every year we're spending a billion or two or three, I don't know, lots of money on that's just absolutely worthless, right? It's going into weapons, it's going into paying, basically corruption within Afghanistan, and we're witnessing right now in real time the propaganda machine of the mass media working to support the military industrial complex, and at the expense of the current president, which I think is unique. And but make no mistake about it, right? So if there is going to be, and I think most people want to get out of it. I mean, that war was not meaningful to most people, right? Except to the military industrial complex. And so most people are going, right, whatever. And I think that, and some are going to be taken in by the propaganda, right? But it's interesting to see what the military industrial complex is going to do next, right? they need war to keep their, their economic machine running. And our task is to figure out, not only are we fighting, the capitalists, but also this national security elite who really are making decisions as much as they can, independent of whoever's elected in Congress or whoever's elected as president. So we have like this other branch of government, the national security state. That's where I think Trump was right. And Trump didn't have the balls, excuse my language, but he didn't have the balls to completely stand up to it, right? He did. He started to. He made this peace deal with the Taliban, but he couldn't pull the trigger, right? And so Biden did, and much to his credit, and much to Trump's credit, that he actually, came to realize that this endless war was not serving the people of Afghanistan and not serving the people of the United States. Maybe that's not how he thought about it, but that's kind of the truth of it. And so he said, well, this is useless. Let's pull out. And let's make a peace deal with the Taliban, which is what he did and what Biden basically followed. So we are in a very unique situation right now about in terms of where this national security state is going to hit next. And if you don't, and this may also, my last thing about this is, you may not agree with me, but it is this national security state that really promoted several years ago this whole Trump and Russia stuff, right? And what and a lot of Democrats just took hook, line, and sinker. And it's all turned out to be not much of anything. Okay. And that's why Trump was never impeached. In large part because there was no case against him. But to have this institution, the national security state, able to override, the American democracy and the structure that we have, right, such as it is an extremely dangerous and fraught situation. And I'm concerned about just like during World War I, that they already have been using it against domestic opponents of war, but they can't do it like they did back then. They're going to come up with something different. And I think, how is it that we can get the American people aware and conscious of this so they don't, number one, fall sucker to the propaganda put out by the mass media on behalf of this national security state, the military industrial complex, really. And then how do we take their power away? How is it we can disempower them, right? I think those are two major questions that I have right now of where we go from here. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Josh. I'll ask a question after you.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Josh. Sorry, I didn't see you.
How much of the military-industrial complex would you say is union, right?
Oh, quite a bit.
And there are some unions that will do things like shut down ports for idealistic stuff, for good reasons, like they may be called idealistic reasons, how hard is it to convince people in the union members in the military industrial complex that we can find other things to do with what we have, and therefore not support effectively just murdering brown people overseas,
right?
And still have a strong, because Boeing makes civilian stuff and
right.
and stuff like that. And is there a lot of pushback to that?
Oh yeah.
in the one of the least unionized states in the country, and having a job that they would not let me organize a union in my workplace because it would just be me. I don't know how to get into, I'm not in a situation where I could have a whole lot of insight in how you get people, union members who have negotiated contracts on jobs to to get behind a less genocidal approach. I mean, not saying the workers, but like the company
Right.
you work for. How unions have historically stood up generally for workers anyway, but across the board. I mean, there was a time that people were really trying to keep them segregated because like they are less effective if they're segregated, and the people don't like unions, like business people don't, because there's a lot of politics and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I guess that's just, I don't know if that was really a question, but like how does union membership in the industries that I'm sure have people also in their unions that aren't necessarily in the war industry? I mean, is there a lot of conflict when it comes to this kind of stuff?
There is some, absolutely. I think, I think that's a great question. Actually, I did hear a question in there, but the parallel maybe to think about is, with climate catastrophe, right? With the fossil fuel industry, right? Which is heavily unionized, right? Coal, not oil and gas, not in the drilling of it, but in the refining of it, in the transport, that kind of thing. The whole argument around the Keystone Pipeline and the Line 3 in Minnesota struggle, and so and this is something that I've worked on in Montana a lot, and I think the parallel is that you have good jobs. These are good jobs, and by how is someone going to react? I mean, no matter how ethical, right, or unethical the job might be, they have a good job that's, especially in these bad economic times, that's providing for a family, and you say, well, you shouldn't have that job. We're going to take that job away. They're going to fight back, right? And this is what I think the environmental movement made a huge mistake, right? And sometimes still continue to do, but I see it less. So where they, instead of saying, well, coal is bad and we shouldn't be mining it and that kind of thing, and all that does is piss people off, and it's bad strategy. I think a better strategy for both climate change and for the military industrial complex is to, number one, realize that the federal government, the military, well, they're both big issues, right? But I do think that the federal government absolutely has the money to, I mean, my idea is the simplest way is just to buy the workers off, right? Don't go through the unions. It's not going to happen through the unions unless you get some good leadership, right? Which isn't coming forth. But for the government to say, okay, we're going to guarantee a lifetime pension. Once you lose your job, you get this lifetime pension, no matter how far, how deep you are into the job, whatever. You just buy off the workers in essence, because, and I think that's the only way you stop producing carbon fuels, and that's how you stop producing this military stuff. Now, there's going to be a lot more other things that go with that, right? But very simply, I think from the worker standpoint, you've got to secure at least the same level of economic stability as they have with their union, right? And then they can fuss all they want, right? And it's going to be like, okay, well, you can issue statements left and right, or go on strike for all we care, right? You know, it's sort of, it takes. I mean, I hate to be cynical about it, but it does. We're in multiple emergencies, right? So we have to sort of take sometimes these kind of routes to you know, to get rid of that, because that's the only thing the military industrial complex has. If you look at their look at their power, okay, they have the power of like being establishment, or being like, you know, a lot of people, whatever the military does, whatever the police do, whatever, I'm all for it, right? I mean, there's people have been propagandized into that. They have that, but ultimately that could be changed pretty. It has changed, you know, even today. But if you look at the economic side, that's, you have to take that weapon away from them. You can't have, you can't let them hold, you know, 20 million families hostage, or how many ever work in the, you know, in the production side, and you can't hold them you can't let them hold them hostage, because that's, they will use that. There's absolutely no doubt about it. They have no scruples whatsoever. They're I know employers that have more scruples than these guys, and they don't really, they don't even care about America, right? As such, they care about keeping their own, you know, their own money game going. So that would be my suggestion, right? Is how to approach approach the military industrial complex on the union worker side of things, just like on the union worker side of things of fossil fuel production. Sarah.
I think Will had something first.
Oh, okay.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I've been just kind of thinking about this. I mean, you mentioned like Richard Trumka and his recent passing. So, and you mentioned him being like kind of a transition point, like a figure, kind of like a figurehead of sorts for being like a transitional point for labor in this country. Like, Trumka stood for some, you know, there's things that like I agreed with him on, but there's some things where I disagreed with him on. Like, and I think he stood for some noble things, but however, like I don't think he, you know, was able to meet this moment, you know, in today's, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, for instance, you know, kind of, you know, kind of building this kind of just transition in labor and things like that. And kind of, you know, things that, you know, go towards, you know, building an equitable and just world. I think he stood for some good things, but, you know, in a lot of ways, some of the things he stood for couldn't quite meet this moment. So just kind of going forward, like thinking about, I think her name is Liz Schuler. Mm-hmm. She's the new AFL CIO. Just kind of thinking like, you know, with people who are, you know, as high as position as like Liz, for instance, in the AFL CIO, like, what are your thoughts, Mark? Kind of, and I'll open it up to anybody who, you know, meeting, you know, today's struggles, you know, climate struggles, kind of, you know, struggles for indigenous climate justice, anti-war, and taking kind of an organizing stance in unions, and common sense reforms like the PRO Act and things like that. Just kind of want to see what you think, Mark, and maybe open it up quickly or something.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So what I meant about Trumka being a transitional figure, not really about policies or stands on issues, because I think more importantly, well, a really brief little bit of labor history, that, you know, in the 1920s, the union movement was flat on its back. It was in worse shape then than it is now. Okay. And even in Butte, right, Will? And so several things happened. I mean, the Great Depression, not being one of the least of them, created a crisis, right, in for workers, and so the really there weren't large numbers as far as we can tell, but in some of the new, the IWW, the Wobblies had really advocated for industrial union organizing, which was accepting they accepted everybody, right? Black and women and Hispanics and whoever you are, if you're not a US citizen. And the AFL part was more of a craft union. They were more in the skilled trades. They did not allow blacks into the AFL for a long time, and women, I believe, too. But the CIO also, and the IWW, inspired in part the CIO, which is Congress of Industrial Organizations, to not only organize all workers, right, whether, no matter who they are, but do it on an industrial model, which meant that the idea was to get what's known as union density in a location in an industry. And so you organize, and that's part of it, but you also organize like in a hotel. That's kind of what organizing I've done. Hotel, they have the housekeepers are the most important workers in a hotel by far, because they make the money for the hotel, right? The restaurant and the bar, and if they have a convention center, conventions can make money too. But the rest of that is just to put heads in beds, right, as they say. And in my union, Unite here, went from a craft union during the 1930s into an industrial union, where we would organize almost everybody within the hotel, whether they were a cook, whether they were a dishwasher, whether they were a housekeeper, so it was not a trade union as such. And those were like two big innovations. The third big innovation, I think, was really nailing down their organizing method. Okay, the CIO organizing method, popularized now by Jane McAlevey, among others, but it's been around for a while. Okay, and this is relational type of organizing. It's person to person. It is lots of work, but it's structured in such a way is that you find natural leaders, organic leaders in any group of people or workplace. And you first organize them and teach them how to organize, and then they organize other people. Okay, that's about as simple as I can say it. And so most of the CIO organizers were either communists or socialists. Okay, and I don't know the story behind that, but I think that would be really interesting. So anyway, in the 1930s. Both the AFL and the CIO grew immensely, and the CIO grew out of nothing to rival the AFL. Okay, and they didn't like each other, right? And so they were kind of opposed. But it really, World War II kind of interrupted some of the labor, the building out of labor and going on strike. But once the war ended, capital was deathly afraid of the labor movement. They saw the labor movement really questioning capitalism, questioning, why is it the capitalists always win these elections, right, and win power. So the union movement was a real challenge to capitalism at that point, and there was especially because of Stalin and his crimes against humanity, that it was easy for the capitalists then to blame the communists. Okay, and we got our next Red Scare, which was totally manufactured, just like the first one during World War I, totally manufactured, but it resonated with people, right? In that the communists were Stalinists, right? They weren't democratic. They were just going to take by force. And what happened was that Congress passed what's known as the Taft-Hartley Act. Okay, some of you know that. And Taft-Hartley essentially took away all the weapons that unions had. You know, it basically emasculated unions, but more importantly, there was a loyalty oath that was designed to have that communists would refuse to sign, right? And so that would give them the pretext, the unions, the pretext to fire them. So right at that point, business unionism started. Okay, with Walter Reuther, I'm going to say that in my opinion, that labor, most of labor, not all, not so like the Longshore Union on the West Coast, and the United Electrical Workers in the East mostly, and a few other unions refused to administer those loyalty oaths. And they maintained the culture of organizing to this day, right? And maintaining that independence. They all got kicked out of the AFL or the CIO, right? And they later merged a few years later. And they got kicked out, and there are still independent unions, and these are the ones that will take action against U.S. militarism, right? These are the ones that actually still know how to organize. And if you want an explanation of why, I mean, my theory of why when there was, well, during the with the passage of Taft-Hartley, that there was this grand peace treaty, if you will, between labor and capital. And labor agreed not to push systemic change and to get rid of all their organizers. And capital agreed not to go after unions and to sit down and bargain with unions, okay? And so, so there was this, you know, a lot of people think this is the great, you know, evolution of unions, but when in fact, and workers increases in productivity, workers got that increase in their salaries or wages, right? So it was very much, you know, if the economy did well, if the employer did well, the workers did well too. Almost like dollar for dollar, until Reagan fired the air traffic controllers in 1980 something, and what was significant about that, so the air traffic controllers were a government union. They're all government employees, right? They work for, you know, for airports essentially, and went on strike, and Reagan fired them all. And that was a signal to all the employers to say, you know what, this major peace treaty, this peace agreement that we crafted back in the 1950s, well, we're unilaterally ripping that up. And so then the attacks on the unions started. And what did the unions do? They lost their culture of organizing, right? Most of them, not all of them, but most of them. And so we're completely blindsided, and you know, and being kicked around to this day, right? I mean, it's gotten better, and there's been some big changes that have happened. It's gotten better. Well, so the head of the AFL-CIO, I remember George Meany, and then Lane Kirkland, and there was another guy that was going to replace Lane Kirkland, and these guys were all about that labor peace treaty, right? Even in the face of massive employer oppression of unions. And so what you know, what John Sweeney and Rich Trumpka, and there was another person too, what, you know, why I mean transition is that they first defeated this old guard union leader, right? And who's going to just do the same old, like, you know, when unions during the Vietnam War, they were pro-war, right? That was part of the deal, right? They were going to go along to get along. Trumka was part of that. Sweeney, they made big changes in the AFL. They got rid of all kinds of staff, which was absolutely needed, and really helped set the discussion about reviving this culture of organizing, the CIO method, right? Or whatever method, right? But the CIO method is tried and true and battle tested. And I think that's what Trumka, he didn't, I would agree with you, Will. He didn't, I don't think he was completely up for the times, right? I would agree with that. But he didn't do what this other, and I forget who it was, but it wasn't Lane Kirkland, but his successor, he was going to do the same old thing. They were going to crush dissent within the union movement. They were going to try to get rid of, anyone that's left of, Jimmy Carter. I mean, literally, it was going to be bad, and so they didn't do that, right? And they instituted some changes that were improvements in how the AFL is just a coalition of unions, right? So they're kind of at the mercy of the heads of all these individual unions that are members. Anyway, and this has gotten to be a lot longer story than I thought, but in effect, okay, right now there is, and Trumka did support like the Chicago teachers, right? In kind of not officially, but behind the scenes, and the LA teachers, right? And these sort of movements from below that is really promising to reform the whole labor movement, to invigorate the whole labor movement. Trumka did not get in the way of that, right? And so he didn't take advantage of it, but he didn't get in the way of it. And that's why I feel like he's a real transition figure. And that's why I hope someone like, Liz is pretty good. I don't know, I see a lot more promise in Sarah Nelson, frankly. So, and she's already demonstrated like the Bush, not Bush, Trump, back, several years ago, where the Republicans and Trump were going to let the government shut down again. Remember that? And she said they had organized, the flight attendants organized, saying, okay, well, if you shut down the government, we're refusing to fly. And they have to have flight attendants. They can't fly without them. So in just one airport, at Kennedy Airport, right? They were going to say, nope, that's it. We're going to take this action. And sure enough, they won, right? They were successful. And that kind of gutsy, like visionary kind of stuff that depends upon organizing your own membership to a high degree is absolutely what labor needs, right? And so I see that in Sarah Nelson. I've already seen an example of that from her. So I do think there's a lot of possibility right now for labor. There's some really good young leaders coming up. Cooper Caraway, who's the president of the South Dakota AFL-CIO. That brother, he would agree with practically everything I just said. So there's people moving up, and there's some leadership that are looking strategically about how labor can get out of the business of making climate disaster and war and get in more into the business of creating a better society.
Thanks, Mark.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that answered it. That answered it pretty good. Yeah, I liked how you explained kind of what you meant by a transition.
Yeah, good. So Sarah, excuse me.
Yeah, so my question kind of goes back to what Josh talked about, and then you elaborated on earlier with the environmental movement. I wanted to know a little bit of your thoughts about the new like infrastructure reconciliation budget bill. because it has become very clear to numerous people that not nearly enough money is going into green infrastructure. I mean, I think that they talked about fixing like all lead pipes in the US because like millions of American homes are still using them. And that went down to like hundreds of thousands of schools that still have them are going to be fixed. Anyway, obviously it's simply absurd. And one of those things I know, I believe it was hydrogen plants, but I know that there were some kind of green energy plants, which the language in it was very vague, but it says like they're going to be put into areas affected by like job loss from emissions emitting infrastructure, which is blah blah. Basically, you know, no more coal, and people need jobs. Um, and so I wanted to know what you think about this kind of generally, what you think the consequences of um, arguably shutting some things down, but not having the infrastructure to continue on, and therefore leaving so many people jobless without, you know, the recreation of something new, and maybe potential solutions if you want to solve, you know, some crises.
Yeah, no, that's another big question. Well, there's sort of a couple of different levels to answer that question. I'd say politically that the Biden administration absolutely has to pass the first infrastructure bill. It's like if they don't pass that, then we're going to get either Trump or, in my opinion, we're going to get either Trump or, which I think would be preferable, then, or like Trump version 2, somebody else much smarter and more competent than Trump. Trump's incompetent, right? I mean, that's, you know, a lot of people see that, and and that's not a very good choice, right? Neither one would be a good choice, and you know, and all the rest of this is just going to go by the wayside. The reconciliation bill, I think, is extremely important. I don't know a lot, you know, I haven't been. It's been a couple of weeks since I've looked at the details of it, so you know, I can't speak exactly to that, but I'd say overall, it's a very important bill as well. I mean, it's as important as the more traditional infrastructure bill, you know, roads and bridges and water plants, things like that. Those are all absolutely necessary because in most of that stuff has fallen apart and has not been taken care of for decades, right? Under, you know, neoliberalism says, oh, we can't afford that, right? Let's you know, all they're doing is just hoping that it privatizes, right? It's too expensive to build, so we'll give it to the private sector, and that is absolute disaster. But the other bill has got probably more, you know, climate catastrophe type of addressing some stuff, and we need to get going on that. That needs to pass simply because of that. And at this point, you know, I don't think, I think it's in a couple of weeks they're going to hold a vote on that one. But I don't, well, my cat's making a cameo appearance. Oh, that I don't think that the, you know, all the Democrats are on board yet, which is like ridiculous. And they're negotiating, trying to get stuff for their own selves. It's like that kind of stuff, whatever it takes, you know. But what I think is going to be, would be a game changer if both of them pass. There's going to be the federal government. I'm just going to say that there's different ways of paying for it, okay? But taxes are not one way they pay for these projects. In fact, you know, taxes don't go to pay for the military. Taxes don't go pay for infrastructure. They don't go pay for government workers' salaries, okay? The government just, you know, Congress appropriates the money, the Federal Reserve writes the check. They just create it, right? So, but there's, you know, there's other kind of they have intervening kind of things that fund it. So, you know, the argument that, and we should have tax increases on the rich, don't get me wrong, for other reasons, but not to raise money for this, right? That horse has left the barn. I mean, the CARES Act passed last year was they're still spending money on it, but it was anywhere between $4 and $8 billion or $1 trillion. Okay, that's a lot of money. Every single dollar of it, I mean, that went to the general public was necessary. They should have spent more. They spent more money on saving financial markets, right? So to save the system, right? So there, it shows you, you know, the Democrats are just as craven as the Republicans that way. But but that being said, you know, these bills spend far less money than the CARES Act on a per year basis, and ostensibly are directed in pretty good directions. And, you know, in your question about climate catastrophe, I mean, our federal government has done really nothing. And so this is going to be a start. And, you know, and it's not perfect. No way is it ever going to be perfect. And it's not the last thing that needs to be done either, right? So you get this in motion, and maybe a couple of years down the line, there's going to be another one and another one and another one to deal with climate catastrophe, which that's kind of what the Green New Deal is about. It's really kind of a legislative roadmap. It's not a bill as such. So, you know, they say, well, we're going to take these steps. And one of the big steps in the Green New Deal is the, you know, taking care of the workers who are going to be displaced. Okay. I do not, you know, training. Okay, whatever. Democrats love training and they promote it all the time, but it doesn't do squat. Okay. I mean, it might on the margins help people get into a new career. I think it's all wrapped up in this. Well, you know, we got to have you working, right? You have to be productive, and you have to do this because we don't have enough money to fund all this stuff, and we need your tax money to pay for it. Well, taxes don't go to pay for this stuff, right? So that's kind of a ridiculous argument. And that's why I say just buy out the workers, guarantee them. You know, in Montana has 4 coal-fired generators, electric generators, which I think Vista owns 2 of them. And I think, is that your utility, Vista?
Yes.
Yeah, so Vista owns 2. Yeah, they own 2 of them, parts of 2 of them. And Vista, you know, basically they need to be closed down. And the workers and their community need to have the Colstrip community, which is actually a really nice community out in the middle of Montana. You've been there, haven't you, Will?
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
You gotta like go there on purpose. That's like
it's not on the way to anywhere, right?
Yeah.
But you know, it's a cohesive community, and you know, just spend the money to guarantee people's incomes for life, right? So you buy them off, buy the workers off, and you're not going to hear a complaint from them after that, right? Because their needs will have been met, and I think it's righteous. I think this is a righteous thing to do, and there's money for it. There's absolutely money for it. So and so that's what I think we got to do wholesale, not just for Colstrip, of course, but for everyone that works directly in the, you know, the coal miners in Alabama, right, who are on strike right now after this like nasty company is trying to cut their wages and steal all their pensions, right? You know, when the United Mine Workers came out with an amazing document. So these are that's the main coal mining union in this country. And they came out with an amazing document. They, if you read it, they basically say, well, our first preference is to, have this keep going. But if we have to shut it down, then our next preference is to, they have like 10 things listed. One of them is guarantee pensions. One is to invest in infrastructure in their communities. Another is to guarantee health care. I mean, these are all like, everyone should be guaranteed these, right? And we can, if we're able to do that and buy off the coal miners, they would be happy to stop mining coal for the most part, right? Because it's a dirty, dangerous, nasty job. And so they do it for the money. You give them the money, they're going to stop doing it, and they're not going to raise a ruckus. And the UMWA's statement is, I think, really groundbreaking when it comes to unions and climate catastrophe, avoidance. And so it's a very encouraging step, and I think that more needs to be done that way. So.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Nick.
Okay, hi. Great speech. Thanks so much. Wanted to hit that military question from something else, just get a response from it, because it's a little idealistic, a little far out, but we think of in the 60s, there were left groups which were organizing in the military. They went into the military to organize. They were really courageous people. I would never join the groups. One was called Progressive Labor. I was scared. Oh my gosh, you'd have to go in there and join the military and organize it. Well, I'm a leftist. But the military did have, in many ways, it did crack. There were all sorts of rebellions in the military. Some people say that the military actually, the rank and file soldiers actually stopped the war in certain ways. They had fracking and they had all these kinds of things, and some people just weren't doing it. They just no.
Right.
And the black soldiers were the leaders in certain ways too. It's like Bobby Seale becomes Black Panthers, So there are these kind of this kind of thing, and even in World War II, blacks rebelled. So I think at a certain point or another, I don't know if you want to respond to this, but I think I live in Washington State, and we've got the military everywhere. We got Fairchild Air Force Base right next to us. It runs Gonzaga University. Hate to say, but fact, I looked at their yearbook the year I went to Gonzaga just the other day, and the only political rally at Gonzaga in 1965 was called a "Don't Withdraw" rally. The only rally on campus, because the military is very strong. But actually, it's in a certain way, the government's weak on that. These are people, and they're not treated very well. They don't get much money, and I don't know if there's any chance to get the labor to actually think a little bit or hint that way that you could organize in the military. There's certainly pretty scary thought, but at a certain point, realistically, we're going to have to think that way if we really are going to change the economy and that kind of thing. So anyhow, I don't know if you have any response to that, but it's on my mind. When I saw that word military and unions, I thought I got to ask. What do you think?
Well, you're exactly right. I think what, the success, which wasn't really apparent to a lot of people. So I have to say, I was the first year turning 18 that we weren't drafted for the Vietnam War, right? So the draft ended in 75. I graduated in 76. But I do remember the war, right? And I remember going to anti-war demonstrations too at the time. And I think there was a lot of, it scared the establishment to their roots at how much opposition to the Vietnam War happened. And along with, the Black Power movement and the environmental movement and the feminist movement. There was a lot of things going on at that time. And so I'm kind of the school of thought, like the the overall strategy is to take power away from the establishment and get more power for the people, right? That's kind of like the, the go-to. But to break that down, I think there's a lot of different ways in which to build the power and to take power away. I think organizing in the military could be very problematic. I mean, it's tough anyway, but you have a volunteer force, which is a lot of economic draft. But when there was a real draft, you got, like unions, right? You got everybody, right? Except for the very wealthy that could get deferments. And college, well, which meant college students, right? That they could defer. So, it's, I don't know of any organizing going on within the military right now. It'd be great if that were to happen. I don't think that's in the union's wheelhouse, but I do think that there's plenty of military people who aren't, the top brass. They're corrupt as hell, and they're also incompetent too, to boot. But they're corrupt, and I would not listen. I would not believe a single word that they say. But there's a lot of junior officers, right, who are, Danny Skirshin. I don't know if you've heard of him. That might be a question to pose to him. He was a colonel, and he's been one of the best critics of the U.S. military. So, organize wherever you can organize. I think the organizing method is very much the same as the CIO method, I think. And I've used that as community organizing back in the day, this one-on-one, getting leaders, finding leaders, and then training them and getting them to do organizing, and then, branching out like that. I mean, there's more to it than that, but I think, if someone were to apply that to the military, that would be a great thing. We're going to have to fight these guys on many different fronts. There's no single silver bullet of changing power like that. So, lots of work indeed.
Thanks. I knew it was kind of a wild card question, but I wanted to throw it in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, it makes me. Do you know Danny Skirshin? Do you know who I'm talking about? I'll send you his contact information. I mean, you should ask him that question, right? And he might know. He might know. So.
Strangely enough, I was thinking about how that was organized in the Vietnam War. Jane Fonda really had a tremendous effect. She had these little shows that they went to the military, and they had the FTA rallies, like fuck the army rallies. They had hundreds and hundreds of soldiers there, and they were the brothers and sisters of union members. They're in families of dads who were in unions, etc. And but labor never caught on, to actually be against the war. And
well, right, because
because
it was anti-communist, right? The war was against the communists, and they had just kicked out the communists out of the labor movement. They're organizers, so it's no big surprise, right? I don't think that would happen today, though. So, I mean, so some things have changed. I don't think that would happen. It may look a little bit different, but I don't think it's going to happen today. Which is it's an improvement over 1969, right?
Thanks.
All right. Well, we are at a little bit over an hour now. So if nobody else has any questions, is there? Do you do a podcast still?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Would you like to plug that a little bit?
I do. Well, we have a show called Voice of the People, radio by and for the 99%, and it's streamed live as well. on Missoula Community Radio, KFGM, which you could get it from noon till 2. The time is gonna change. We're gonna go on Saturdays from 1 to 3 here pretty soon. I'm not sure when, but in any event, it's probably easier to catch the podcast for you folks in Spokane. And it's I'm gonna write in the, it's probably easier to write. So I'm gonna turn on my light. So it's anchor.fm/POP. And so you can go there and you can listen to past shows. You know, we have a strong democratic socialist bent, but not entirely. We have Republicans as guests occasionally, and try to find common ground. You know, we have many people who are kind of like regulars and whatnot, but labor, you know, labor is kind of one major theme, but it's not the only one. We talk a lot about neoliberalism and about and starting to do more about, well, what would it look like under socialism, right? What would democratic socialism, how would that be different, right? So, you know, please listen in if you can. And our last show was a Labor Day show, and went way too long. But you know, in that show, I interview the head of the Missoula Central Labor Council, current head, the new president of the Montana AFL-CIO, and Don McIntosh, who's the Northwest Labor News reporter for 20 years or so, 20 plus years. And it's interesting to hear. I mean, it's very interesting. There's a lot of similarities. Don has by far the more in-depth knowledge about the kind of questions, and basically asks, where does the labor movement need to go from here? And then we have 3 other people, and we discuss it and kind of joke around or bring up our own ideas, that sort of thing. So that was our last show. And if that sounds at all appealing to you, then you know, go to the podcast and you can listen to it. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, for sure. I will send that out when I send the general meeting info to the group, and I'll also try to link it in the YouTube video as soon as we put it up. If anyone else, it's getting pretty late. I know a bunch of us are on the East Coast too, so we can save our other kind of general meeting stuff. I'll try to do like a Google poll to see for future events what we would like to do, and then we can just talk about that in the next meeting, which will be 2 weeks from now. But in any case, does anybody else have any webinars, anything else they'd like to plug before we say goodbye? And one more time, thank you so much, Mark. Excellent to have you here.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Mark. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
Really good.
Thank
And
you.
Nick, yeah.
Good to see you, Mark. Really good. Yeah.
All right, then thank you so much, and I will see y'all soon.
Wait, Sarah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. About Afghanistan and anti-war and anti-imperialism, that we've got a candidate that the Green Party is going to try to run for Senate in North Carolina named Matthew Hoh. I don't know if he's been on a whole lot of stuff recently. He was he got, I think he was injured over